There is such a bill drafted by me on the delimitation of privileges to participants in hostilities into two categories: the participants of the immediate armed clashes and, as I say, all the rest. Since November 2014, the rehabilitation of ATO fighters has taken place in the hospital system of war veterans. There are 30 hospitals in Ukraine.
30 госпіталів.
If we take into account the entire rehabilitation system, then we must begin with the law. Those laws that are in effect today should be changed, because ordinary rehabilitation and rehabilitation for combatants are completely different forms of rehabilitation. In Ukraine, we were not ready for war, and there are no protocols, as in other countries, as to what to do with the guys who returned from the war zone. It's all about such enthusiasm. We're looking for new methods and new effective ways of psychological influence. Since the beginning of the Russian aggression in the east of Ukraine, more than 350,000 fighters have received the status of combatants. Unfortunately, the war continues and the number of veterans will only continue to grow. That is why at the legislative level, the state should take care of all these heroes who are fighting for the independence of Ukraine without sparing their own strength and health. In addition to combatant status and in addition to benefits for utilities, they pay only 25%. The rest is paid by the state. There are other programs. For example, it works very well today in my native city of Lutsk, where those soldiers injured and incapacitated by war of the second group who have nowhere to live have the right to housing provision and take advantage of this right at the expense of funds provided by the Ministry of Social Policy. A lot of fighters received such benefits. On average, it is 900,000 to 1.5 million hryvnias for the purchase of housing. Benefits such as a discount on utility bills and priority care in medical institutions apply not only to combatants but also to members of their families. Also, veterans have the right to receive a loan for the construction of a new home, the overhaul of residential buildings, as well as the purchase of country villas and the improvement of their garden plots. This is all concisely written in the law. A good program works where people with disabilities of the third group and combatants are provided with housing assistance, but in the context of 50-50. That is, the state compensates 50% and the war veteran pays 50% for himself. That is, these programs exist and I firmly believe that they're working quite effectively. Another important bill should be adopted soon, experts say. It is about rehabilitation, the law which should bring the system of psychological and medical-social rehabilitation in Ukraine to a new level. Scholars, physicians, officials of relevant ministries, associations and volunteer organizations took part in the drafting of this critically important document. To date, we want to introduce the law to the participants of the hostilities. It explains what is rehabilitation all about, when it should be provided, who should provide it, what kind of specialists should be there, and we specially pay attention to the stage when rehabilitation should be provided. During the 5 years of hostilities in the network of hospitals, almost 67,000 fighters have been treated and rehabilitated. Of these, more than 40,000 were treated in 8 hospitals out of 30. Every day, more than 200 soldiers stay in the medical center for treatment. We're the largest center, which today treats a large number of ATO fighters from all regions of Ukraine on a daily basis. Experience shows that our patients, the soldiers demobilized to the reserve, have quite serious health problems. Almost everyone needs comprehensive rehabilitation. They need medical rehabilitation, treatment of somatic diseases. They need physical rehabilitation, restoration of the functions of systems and bodily organs, in particular the musculoskeletal system.
Відновлення функцій систем і органів, зокрема опорно-рухова.
Also, they definitely need psychological rehabilitation.
Психологічна
Basically, this is a neurological disease. This is a disease of the brain and the peripheral nervous system, plus trauma to the bones and spine. And every year we see the therapeutic diseases are highly increasing among young patients. These are cardiovascular diseases and diseases of the gastrointestinal tract. In November 2014, a department for rehabilitation was opened for ATO soldiers in Sibli. In October 2015, the Department of Crisis Conditions began to operate there. In November 2018, the Department of Medical and Psychological Rehabilitation was opened, and on February 11, 2019, after renovations in less than a month, the center opened another specialized department for the fighters.
В цьому я вбачаю
I see the great patriotism of our workers. I mean helping our fighters from the first days of the arrival of the soldiers to us. Since November 2014, our people always meet them in the reception room with a smile. They work hard and put their heart and soul into rehabilitation process. That is why the fighters want to come to our center. They feel that they are cared for.
серця в реабілітацію, а тому бійці хочуть до нас їхати.
Я сюди постійно їздю. Перший раз я
I come here often. The first time I got here was in November of 2016, since here neurology is individually suited to each patient, rather than using standard patterns as in other hospitals. So I always ask them to send me here.
Ну, я сюди просюся завжди їхати.
Psychological rehabilitation is one of the most important spheres in restoration of health and the return of fighters to a peaceful life. When ATO fighters come to the hospital for treatment, they first of all visit the psychologist's office.
Насправді вони отримують
In fact, they receive such a dose of stress in terms of intensity and strength which they did not expect, and we also did not expect it here. It's such a dose that a human being can get in a lifetime. It is as if their nervous system is a balloon, and then it suddenly is blown up. In fact, it hurts so much, and they all come here with traumas.
і вони приїжджають всі травмовані.
Psychological assistance begins with the diagnosis. The psychologists try to determine the condition of the fighter, how he feels, and how intensely his nervous system was affected by combat. So main issue is to determine whether they have a post-traumatic stress disorder.
В них це тривожність, закритість.
Some of them have anxiety, closeness. Some have impulsiveness, aggression, and unmotivated vigilance. In any case, it is stressful. And at the stage of diagnostics, we already determine the directions to understand how we can work with them. For some, this is group therapy. Those who are more injured require individual therapy.
Індивідуальна терапія.
In addition to medical and psychological rehabilitation, physical and sports rehabilitation is also of great importance, says Vadym Svyrydenko, a veteran of the ATO, President's Commissioner for Rehabilitation. As a result, not only the state of mind of a human being changes, but also life itself, and a person starts to think and plan differently. For those soldiers who were captured, the state should offer a special program for reintegration into civilian life.
У нас вже відомі марафони морської піхоти.
We already have the famous marine marathons and Invictus Games, but this is the end result. I may say not final but intermediate, because it is necessary to force a man to go through this path of rehabilitation through sports and recovery. The person passes through it, sees the result, and willingly comes to the competitions. And then they must go on and climb further up this difficult ladder.
Змагань і далі має йти цими ж сходами важкими підніматися.
Vadym Svyrydenko is an extraordinarily courageous, open, and positive man. He served as a medical expert of the 128th Separate Mountain Infantry Brigade. He lost both feet and hands in the Debaltseve pocket in the winter of 2015. He's a bronze medalist in rowing competitions on simulators at the 3rd Invictus Games 2017 in Toronto, Canada. Now he's creating a special rehabilitation system for war veterans.
Я вивчав досвід.
I studied both American and Canadian experience. Each hospital should have its own rehabilitation center. And these are not only people who have suffered physical traumas. Even after medical intervention, a person needs to undergo rehabilitation. While my ultimate dream is the construction of a large national rehabilitation center in Ukraine.
Величезний реабілітаційний центр побудований в Україні.
International partners also help Ukrainian veterans. At the expense of the NATO Trust Fund, the first ergotherapeutic room was purchased and installed, and a special military workshop was set up in the Lviv Military Hospital. In 2016, the North Atlantic Alliance Trust Fund handed over special equipment to the hospital in Sibli. That equipment was for restoring the functions of the joints of the soldiers' upper and lower limbs. Recently, the Ministry of Veterans Affairs was established in Ukraine. The purpose of the newly formed institution is to effectively address the issues of veterans, because today there are more than 1 million of them in Ukraine. They all need government support and attention.